to start or to continue with the international part of this seminar. It is a great honor for me to introduce Professor Ali Bayar. In this first speech that opens this seminar, and it is a great honor, a great pleasure to have with us one of the world experts, one of the most important characters in everything regarding the construction of general balance models, and as he will let you know, with some other types of models. He is a president of a school that's called Ecomod, where this institution provides training courses in different parts of the world around the subject matter of today's conference. This related to fiscal, environmental, monetary aspects and some others. He is also a professor at the University of Berlin, the University of Brussels. He's a researcher of the German Institute for Economic Research, and he is also a member of different boards on economic policies, and he is a member of different national and international academic journals. He's also been a consultant of the European Union for econometric modeling. He has been working with economic strategies with the EU on finances, taxes, the energy, the environment, and climate change. He's also participated in multilateral negotiations on free trade agreements, job-related problems, and some others. He's been a consultant to the World Bank, the Central European Bank, the Federal Reserve, UN organizations, and generally speaking, well, his resume is quite long, quite extensive. He has been in this field working for several decades. So without no further ado, I just want to thank him for having accepted this invitation. It's a pleasure for us to listen to him, especially since we are aware of the fact that he has visited more than 100 countries around the world, teaching classes on general equilibrium models. He has been in many universities, more than 1,000 developmental institutions. And just to conclude, he has a PhD on economics, and he is an expert on the quantitative analysis to model environmental and all sorts of situations, as I've mentioned before. So once again, thank you, Dr. Ali Bayar, for being with us, and the floor is all yours.
Thank you so much, dear colleague. Thank you so much as well to all of you for being here. It's a great pleasure to be at the university and in Mexico City. I would like to thank for the kind invitation. Given that in the program there are other colleagues who will be presenting papers which are more technical, both on data issues and on modeling and analysis, what I will do is rather give you some intuition in economic modeling, provide you a broader framework for modeling policy issues, decision issues, and also what we have learned in our long experience in more than 150 countries around the world, and working with more than 1,000 institutions. What kind of principles, what kind of lessons can we draw from this experience, which can be useful for modelers in Mexico? So this is what I will try to do. So you will not see any equations or any programming, just some intuition and talk. But of course, if you have any technical questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them afterwards. Now, as you know, in less than 2 weeks, there will be an important vote in your neighbors. And that is important not only for the US, but it's also important for Mexico, but for the world in general. Now, talking about the economy, of course, everybody knows it is important for, let's say, international relations, or it's important for the US. But does it matter for the Mexican economy who wins the election? Let's start with this question. Is it important? Does it matter that Clinton be the next president? Will she have an impact on the Mexican economy in the coming 4 years? Or his impact? Now, from an economist, these questions seem to be a little bit strange, but they are not, as you know very well. As we have seen in the past weeks, that there is already some impact created by the uncertainty and by the fact that Trump might win the elections. But the answer, what kind of impact might Trump have or Clinton might have, well, there's not a really easy answer. So in order to answer this question, well, we need some tools. We need some knowledge, some theory, but even that is not enough. We need a lot of experience in financial markets, in economic management. Some people might prefer just taking a piece of paper, pen and pencil, and figure out what might happen, some kind of scenario, simple scenario analysis. Some people might take an Excel spreadsheet. This is what is done in many, many countries and in many, many institutions. Put some numbers and try to figure out what might be the impact. And some colleagues might go further, or some institutions might build models for scenario analysis, or might use their existing models to do some forecasting under different scenarios, because the scenarios are uncertain. They are stochastic. We don't know. We will know it by November the 9th. But until that time, we don't know. It's a probabilistic issue. Now, if you are a fund manager, if you are managing billions of dollars, well, that question, does it matter, is really banal. Of course, it matters a lot, because you might lose hundreds of millions of dollars if you predict well, if you predict wrongly, or you might earn hundreds of millions of dollars if you predict well. So even a simple event, a regular event which is happening in a neighboring country, might have so important impacts on other countries. And there are so many examples of this. The financial crisis, for example, in 2007, 8, 9, let's say, started in the US. But the major impact has been on the European banks and in Europe, and it is still ongoing. The recession ended much earlier in the US than in Europe or in some other countries. So it is quite complex to answer this question. And in many cases, not only for this question, but in many cases, for many, many questions, economic questions or social questions, many decision makers, policy makers in many countries are like this gentleman. When they try to make a decision, they are trying to find their way, but they don't really see much. And very often, the decisions they make are not necessarily the optimal decisions, the best decisions. And then afterwards, what we, as an economist, call ex post, after the event takes place, They wonder why they took such decisions. Or as policymakers, usually we should think before taking the decisions, after what we call ex ante analysis, before the events, before the decisions, to improve our policies. Because when we are policymakers at the government level or institutional level, or if we are decision makers in companies, especially big companies, banks, oil companies, mineral companies, distribution companies, and so it doesn't matter which companies. Well, there are so many decisions to be taken on a regular basis. When you go to a meeting of the board of an important country, you have an agenda like this in the university as well. I've been a member of the board of the University of Brussels, and I know, we had hundreds of pages of agendas at each meeting. So there are so many decisions to be taken. Now, which road to take? Because for each decision, fortunately, there are so many alternatives, so many options. Which ones are the best? Which road should we take? Which road will improve the lives of our citizens, or the future of our institution, or the welfare of the population? So these are really very important questions. Now, the answers are not easy in economic life, because as you know very well, the economy is extremely complex. It is dynamic. It is evolving all the time. There are so many different agents, so many different products, so many different markets, so many different institutions. And this whole complex dynamic system is adapting all the time to so many different impacts, shock, influences. So it is really not straightforward to understand what's going on and find your way and take good decisions. It's really complex. And because of this complexity and dynamic adaptive system and all the interactions between agents and markets, it is very difficult to just use Excel or piece of paper while taking decisions. And also, some decisions might have much broader impacts than the area that we initially target. For example, we've been working recently a lot. I just came from the region yesterday, late in the afternoon. As Dr. Lilia knows, I've been traveling around the world in the past really couple of weeks, and I didn't know from where I would be coming to Mexico City, because we are doing a lot of consulting work, advisory work around the world to oil companies, governments, and so on, and regional institutions. So we are doing, for example, I came from Dubai yesterday. So before that, I was in Qatar, Bahrain, Abu Dhabi, and so on, Saudi Arabia, and so on. We are doing a lot of work for those countries, for example, recently, because they want to know what would happen in their economies, but also in the world economy, if the oil price goes up. Now, this is a really simple question. The oil price goes up and down. Well, the impact of an increase in the oil price is not only in the oil market. When the oil price increases or decreases, that increase or decrease influence many other markets, many other companies, many other countries. And the influence is very different depending on, the structure of the economy, how much oil dependent the country is. The impact in the oil countries, of course, is too big. They are almost bankrupt in some countries, oil-producing countries. In some other countries, it is smaller. But you see, it is so difficult even to guess, to know what the effect might be of an oil price increase or decrease. Because the reason is, oil is used everywhere. It is used by us to drive cars because we use gas. It is used to produce electricity. It is used to produce plastic. It is used in our shoes. It is used in our shirts. It is used in our homes. It is used everywhere. So a simple change in the oil price may have so complex, so many impacts on the economy. So this is why, because of these complexities and economy-wide effects, life is really difficult for policy makers and decision makers. And it is not finished yet. Given that economic agents are human beings, and human beings have emotions, but also thinking capacity, reasoning, they may change behavior. And that is the complexity of economics with respect to physics or chemistry. Because in physics or in chemistry, as far as we know, particles don't think. They are very complex, they have very complex behavior, but they don't think. Molecules don't think. Human beings as agents in economic life, they react. When something happens somewhere, they react because of their thinking, their experience, their traditions, their culture, their knowledge, or their emotions. And it is very difficult to know how they will react if you don't have enough data about them, enough information about them, and so on. And this is something also we need to capture. Another complexity in economic modeling, in decision making, in planning, is that when we take a decision, the longer run effects might be larger than the short run. And that seems to be really counterintuitive. Because when a government takes a decision, usually policymakers are interested in what might happen, for example, in 2016, 17. And that we can understand because they need to be elected. They have a constituency. They need votes. But the problem is, for some policy measures, the long-run impacts are larger than the short run. The reason is because in the long run, economic agents, firms, consumers, households, workers, they have time to adjust themselves. So they will have time to adjust themselves. It means that the long-run impacts will be larger. So it means that as a government or policymaker, we cannot just think about the short-run effects and take our decisions based on short-run issues. We have to think also about the long-run issues. And that's not easy for policymakers. They are not. Because the future generations will not vote. Our kids, our grandchildren will not vote for today's politicians. We are going to vote for today's politicians. So they may not really care. Or as you have mentioned, and many colleagues here work on these issues, or climate change, environmental issues, energy issues, water issues. They are about long-term issues. So it is really difficult to convince policymakers to take them into account because they are mostly busy considering short-run effects. And also, another issue which is really important about policy is that very few policies produce only winners. Most policy measures produce also losers. So if you are a decision maker, it is really important for you to know before taking the decision who might lose and who might win. Now, how can you know this? Well, you can't if you don't have the tools. You can't sit down, take an Excel spreadsheet or a piece of paper or talk with your colleagues and know who might win and who might lose in most cases. The reason is it's too complex. There are so many indirect effects and dynamic effects. So you need tools to identify who might lose and who might win. And many policies, as we know, have international effects. So we need to take them into account as well. If Trump gets elected, well, there will be huge effects in many countries, including Mexico. And we need to be ready. We need to have, let me give you an example. Long time ago, before the crisis of 2008 and 9, just an interesting example. As you know, oil price, the crude oil price, was between $140 and $150 per barrel. And many people thought, and there was a theory, colleagues who work on energy issues know that, peak oil theory, and many people were talking about $200, $300 per barrel. And we built models for many, many institutions around the world, and we use them for projections, impact analysis, this kind of things. And many governments, you know, when we set up scenarios with them, we have to decide, because we don't know, it's about the future. So we have to decide with them what the oil price we should use when we run projections, long run projections. And many governments asked us to use $200, $300, $150, and so on and so on. One institution, and that was really surprising, and that was in 2006, asked us to use $40, 40, while everybody else was talking about 300. I was quite surprised at the beginning. But the team suggesting 40 was a very experienced team in oil, very, very experienced. They were the leaders of ExxonMobil. So we did run the projections. What happened in 2008? Oil price was $40. Those who knew what might happen, the impacts of a $40, were ready for this kind of event. They knew, because we did all kinds of detailed analysis with them, sit them and with them. And those who was working just on 300 and 200 had no clue. So we had to run in an urgency many other scenarios and so on and so on, because these kind of extreme shocks might have so unusual impacts and international impacts and so on and so on. Even if the probability is small, the impact might be so big. And if you are not ready, you might lose so much. So it's better to keep in mind all these complexities, relations, international linkages, and also domestic linkages, of course. So these kind of tools don't replace us as an economist or a specialist, but they help us to better advise the decision makers. They don't replace us. You know, we don't press a button and give the result. Models are not number generators, even if today, unfortunately, in many countries, they are used like number generators. Now, the way we should use, you know, when we make a policy, we should make our policies as much as possible on facts. Facts are provided by good data, timely data, but they are also provided by our models. So when you go to a meeting, and this is something I'm sure you have seen so many times, but I've really seen this so many times, before analyzing the data or running simulations or scenarios, many people think, what do you think about, you know, start the meeting, what do you think about this? Well, this is really starting with the wrong question, because what we think should depend on what we know. So what we need really to do is start with this first question, this one. What do we know about this issue? What does the data say? What do our models say? Have we run the scenarios? Have we run projections? Have we run impact analysis? You know, what kind of facts have we collected? This is really key. You know, if we don't have these tools to help our thinking, to open our mind, we can't really make good decisions. You know, it is important to collect the evidence as much as we can. Then, based on this evidence, we can ask, what do you think about this? What shall we do? What are our options? Which are the best? And so on and so on and so on. So it's really important. And for this, of course, we need skilled people like you And it is really difficult to find these people, because to be a good modeler, you need to be good in, of course, for example, if it is economics, good in economics, but also good in statistics, in mathematics, in software, in archiving, in being organized, and so on and so on. Really, it's very difficult to find those people. We have a school, we train really thousands of people around the world. Those people are really very valuable people. So if you find any of those people, you should value them a lot, because they are really rare. So we need skilled people, we need analytical tools, databases, different kinds of models, not one model, but different kinds of tools, and also good data. These are really key. But very briefly, what is a model? Let me also say a couple of things about this, because we also need some clarification. A model, if simply defined, if you open a book or article, you will say, well, it's a bunch of identities, equations, and some data, parameters, coefficients, and so on. But in reality, a model is much more than that. A model is a purposeful, so the word purpose is really important, is a purposeful representation of the reality. The reality is too complex. So we need to simplify it. Now, the problem is there are many ways of simplifying the reality. There's no one way of simplifying the reality, you see? And this reality is too complex and dynamic, and it changes very often slowly and so on. If I need to take the decision, I cannot sit down and watch 20 years, 30 years to see what will happen with the reality. You see? It is too slow for me. If I'm a policymaker, I can't wait 50 years to see if there's a climate change or not. I can't wait for 100 years if there's climate change or not. It's too slow. What will happen in the meantime will influence the climate for the coming centuries. I can't wait. So what we do then is to simplify this reality depending on our purpose. So it means that if I want to analyze, for example, what might be the impact of a change in the tax system in Mexico on, for example, income distribution, you see, then I'm going to build a model where I need to have different income groups, different types of households in my model. Because the purpose of my model is to see how different people will be influenced by changes in taxes. You see, the purpose is so important. If I want to analyze the impact on the climate of, for example, introducing pollution permits, like, for example, the European Union has, or a carbon tax, well, then I need in my model, you see, the climate itself, temperature, the linkage between what goes on with energy consumption, greenhouse gas concentrations, the temperature, you see, then I will have another model. You see what I mean? So when we build models, we always need to keep in mind that there is no general model. There's no one model which can address all the questions. None. So we need to build our tools. These are tools. So we build tools which address questions. So it means that before starting building the model, we have to ask ourselves, what is the purpose of this model? What are the main issues that we are going to analyze using this model? So it means that when we build models or use models, we don't go and buy a model from the shelf, off the shelf. It is not like buying bananas or tomatoes or oranges. We need to sit down and design it with the users, with the government agency, with the whatever the agency, the ministry which will use it. It's really important. So the purpose of a model plays the role of a filter, you see, because the model represents in a simplified way, any model, not just in economics, in physics, in chemistry, it's the same story, represents in a simplified way the reality. But in order to simplify the reality, because it is so complex, we have to filter the reality, just to keep the essential elements to answer our questions. That filter depends on the purpose, you see? So this is why it is so important. Then, of course, the question, given that there are so many options then in modeling as well, you see there's no one model, there's no one modeling technique, there's no one single model. This doesn't exist. It is like tools. We have bicycles, we have our feet, we have planes. From when I came yesterday from Dubai, I didn't swim. Or I didn't drive a car. These are also tools. I didn't take a horse. I took a plane. You see, it depends on the purpose. So the same thing with the model. So which model? Well, it depends also for whom. To do what? So these are all the questions that we need to answer. And nowadays, fortunately, there are so many techniques in economic modeling. So we are very fortunate to have more and more data, more and more powerful software, more and more powerful computers in order to build techniques, develop techniques and models which can help decision makers, policy makers. And me and my colleagues work on all these techniques and we also teach. Our school, the Ecomod Modeling School, teaches many of them around the world. And they can be used. I mean, of course, we don't have time to go into any details, but if you are really interested in any of this, so it is not, so of course, general equilibrium model is, this is really the main theme of this workshop and conference, and also social canning matrices are key elements, key tools that we use nowadays in policy making, in policy analysis, economic analysis, but we have also so many, fortunately, other tools. So it is always important to keep in mind that we have so many options, we have to choose the best tools, and also we can use them together. And then we can apply them in so many different fields, in energy, water, climate change, income distribution, fiscal policy, budget preparation, transportation, even building models. A couple of years ago, there was a new building in the new airport in Moscow, and after the building was built, they wanted to see, if it was okay, and they brought in 5,000 people, and let them in, as I said, and said, well, now you are the passengers, to see, if everything was working properly. But of course, it was useless to bring 5,000 people after the building was built. What they should have done is to build three-dimensional airport model on the computer and bring in the model, you see, not in the reality, in the model, not 5,000 passengers, but 10,000 passengers, 20,000 passengers, and see how they behave in the model, and then adjust the plans with the architects before building the airport, and so on and so on. And this is really what models are. Of course, we use them also together, these models. So in policy modeling, a couple of additional things to keep in mind is that one single model is not really, enough to address the questions. The other thing which is really important is to avoid the law of the instrument. What the law of the instrument says that the one who holds a hammer thinks everything is a nail. And also, as colleagues working in the economic modeling area, I'm sure they have seen so many papers that colleagues, they only know one single technique, and they want to apply this to any issue. Well, that's not the right way to do it, because an economic model is just a tool. So we have to make sure that the tool is relevant to the issue to be analyzed. So this is why we need, different tools. And when we talk about different tools in economics, we have the concept of equilibrium. I'll come back very shortly to this as well. So partial or general equilibrium, they are both very useful, extremely useful. In the partial equilibrium analysis, of course, we analyze just one single market at once. We forget about the others, the interactions, the linkages with the other markets. We assume that all the other markets, all the other prices and so on, supply and demand in the other markets, they remain as they are. This is an abstraction. Why do we do this? Well, it simplifies life. It is much easier to understand things in partial equilibrium than in general equilibrium, because in general equilibrium, well, it's really complex. because we need to take into account all these dynamic linkages between agents, markets, products, factors, countries, spillovers, feedback effects. Something happens in the oil market, it has a spillover effects on manufacturing or on services or on electricity. And then what happens in the manufacturing sector will have a feedback effect on the oil prices and so on and so on. You see, that becomes really complex. We need much more data, and also it becomes much more complex to model them and to understand them. And many makers, and also ourselves in our daily life, we usually think in terms of partial equilibrium. Now, in the general equilibrium, so this is a really workhorse in economic modeling. It is not the only one, but it is one of the main modeling tools. But there are so many tools. We have input-output. We have social accounting metrics that, you had a great workshop, and I would encourage you to continue. This is a great framework to use for policy analysis. It can be real, just for the real economy, or we can include financial elements or environmental elements in the social accounting matrix, even income distribution. And we can use a kind of multiplier analysis by assuming that the prices will not change. We can do the same thing with the computable general equilibrium models, where we assume that the prices might change. So they are better than the social accounting matrix multiplier analysis. But we can also have a dynamic CGE model. We can take into account the linkages in time, you see. We can have what's called the overlapping generations model, OLG. Then we take into account also the age groups in our models, because different age groups, as you know, have different consumption patterns, different savings patterns. For some questions, it is really important to take them into account as well. We have also real business cycle models, RBC, or dynamic stochastic general equilibrium models, where we can take into account stochastic events, risk about some events happening in the future, and how we can take them into account. You see, general equilibrium modeling framework is a very rich framework. It takes into account thousands and thousands and thousands and millions of linkages between factors, households, companies, governments, countries. It's extremely complex, but it's a very powerful tool. Because it is powerful, when we build them, we need to be very careful building them, okay? Because they can also mislead us. So we need to be very careful. But they have great benefits because they cover all the economy. We can introduce a lot of details in our general equilibrium models, taxes, subsidies, different types of households, different types of companies, and so on, and dynamics as well. And when we build models, especially general equilibrium models, we need to be extremely systematic. And this is something, so we need a lot of discipline. And given that these tools might influence the policy measures, the results, so we need to be like a medical doctor. A medical doctor, when he or she graduates, as you know, undertakes an oath that he or she will not harm. Well, as a modeler, we should do the same. We have a social responsibility not to harm our countries, not to harm our citizens, because the models that we use for policy purposes that we build, they may influence the decisions, and those decisions may influence millions of people. So we need to be extremely disciplined, extremely systematic, extremely careful, meticulous when we build models. So given that we don't really have time, I will not go into the details, but these models can be used in many different areas, as I said, and they are actually used, as a couple of papers will be presented this afternoon and tomorrow at this conference, and you will see examples of this. But of course, we have so many issues, so we need to be careful also. CGE models or macroeconometric models or social accounting models, any model, they should be used, developed, and used with care. They are not sacred books. They are not like Bible. We are talking about science. So in science, we start from the reality, from the facts. So in model building, we should do the same. We should not start from a theory which is not being validated. You see? So, and in general equilibrium modeling, this is one of the weaknesses. Many colleagues just started from the theory, but that theory has never been validated. So it means that when we build models, including general equilibrium models, we mostly need to be very open-minded and change the theory. We need to take into account what actually happens in reality, understand as much as possible, design our models with the decision makers together, and introduce them in our models, rather than trying to keep as the theory suggests, because that theory in economics has not been validated. So we need to become, so there are many, many issues in model building, so we don't have time really for this, but if you have any questions, of course, I'll be happy to answer them about expectations, about data, about the theory we use, so many different things, about finance, about money, and so on. But about equilibrium concept, so many other things, about type of market, competition, imperfect competition, and so on. But let me say a few additional things, and then I will stop. When we build models, we need to be really careful about the main use of the model. Will it be a policy model or an academic model? Because they are not the same things. An academic model usually can be small, simple. Usually we build models as academics to write papers, and we don't have enough time, we don't have enough resources. Usually we do it alone or with some co-authors, so it is okay. They don't necessarily need to be very realistic, as long as they are not used for decision making, policy making. If it's about policy, it's another story. We should not act as academics, because those tools have another purpose. You see, once again, purpose. For policy models, we need models which are much, much more realistic, much more detailed, much better tested. The reason is they might influence the decisions, and those decisions will influence people's life. So we are responsible, like medical doctors. So it is really important to keep this in mind. And in policy models, we should make sure that they are relevant, up-to-date, and dynamic. Relevant means if we build a model for Mexico, well, we should make sure that it represents Mexican economy. If we build for a model for the Ministry of Finance in Mexico, well, we should make sure that in our model, the tax system of Mexico is well represented. I cannot go and take a model from the shelf for the US or for Germany or for France or for China and give it to the Ministry of Finance in Mexico and say, oh, use it. And believe me, there are so many consultants who does this. So we should make sure that our tools are relevant. They are up to date. Why? Because the data changes all the time. So our models are like live beings. We need to improve the data, update the data at least once a year, at least. We cannot build a model and use it for 10 years. So this is really important. And also a model needs to be dynamic. As an economist, as academics, we might use static models, what we call steady-state models, but policymakers, they need to know the impact of their decisions in time. What might happen in 2016, 17, 18, and so on and so on. So we need dynamics in our models. They need to be transparent. We need to be able to explain. We cannot go and just say, oh, if you take this decision, well, GDP will increase by 2%, or unemployment will decrease by X%. Why? You see? We need to be able to explain where those numbers come from. It should not be a black box, even if it's very complicated. So our tools should be reliable if they are used in decision making. If you don't use reliable models in a company, the company will go bankrupt. It's more or less the same thing with the government. So this is really important. So a model needs to be, so this is why it's a long-term work. And the data is key, so I'm so happy that you have organized with this in a here, because it's really important. And when we use models, we need to use them very, very carefully, not just to provide numbers. So we still need our knowledge, our experience, but keep always in mind our social responsibility. And also that model building is a really teamwork. So we have to design the models with our clients, with the ministries, with the government, whatever institution uses our models. It's really important that we jointly work together, and also as modelers, to work with other colleagues, multidisciplinary or interdisciplinary models. We need not one model, several models, diversity of tools, because one single model cannot address all issues, as I said, and one size doesn't fit all. You cannot go and take one model, because I've seen that also so many times in so many countries. People using just a model which was built for the US and using it for an African country. It doesn't make any sense, does it? It doesn't make. And also, when you build a model, act like a gentleman. Start small. Even if you want to build a big model, start a small one, and simple one. Especially simple, then in introducing the model all the complexities. Because building simple models are really difficult, believe me. It's like iPhone and so on. It was much more difficult, much easier to build complicated telephones. But simplifying things was really extremely difficult. And start small, like us. We'll grow one day. The model's the same thing. So you start small and it will grow one day. And keep what is essential. What is not essential, leave out of the model. It's a long-term work, so this is why it's so important to training, building capacities, resources, and to improve the models, to update them regularly, and to review them. And models are not enough. They need to be used with databases also. And for the databases as well, they need to be user-friendly. And the models as well. So, and at Ecomod, we also build software to be able to do this. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bayar. Now we will move on to our Q&A session. We will do the following. First of all, we will listen to all the questions from the audience, if that's okay with you, Ali. If we first get all the questions, and afterwards we go directly to your answers. Is that okay? Go directly to your answers. Is that okay? So first the questions.
Thank you, Ali, for your presentation. I'm going to introduce myself in Spanish, and now I ask you my question.
I'm Professor Gardenete from the University of Andalusia. Tomorrow you will be listening to my presentation. But first I'd like to ask you, Ali, about your presentation.
First of all, congratulations for your presentation. It's a very clear vision about our charge of CG modeling. But I don't agree with you about the way to try to use our models, computational models, from the point of view of academic and point of view of policy. In my experience, and you know perfectly, I was working in the European Commission and interaction with other type of similar institutions, OECD, FAO, World Bank. There are no people with high level of knowledge of our models in academic sense. I mean, there are a lot of users, they use the model, but they don't control the model. And I have seen directly, personally, to use a model without take care about the data, about the parameters, about the elasticities, and everything is fine. And the point is that using this kind of model, you suggest to the policymaker to take decisions, and after that, there are some decisions based on model that perhaps is not suitable to do it. And the problem is because, my opinion, is that the people that are working in these kind of institutions don't have enough level to control this kind of model. And this rupture between academic and policy user, from my point of view, is not good. Because at the end, if at the end we suggest, from the point of view of policymaker, we suggest bad suggestions, at the end we are going to find problems in our theory and in our application, and people some years later, they are decided not to use our models. So I am very worried about it, because more and more there are a lot of people using, a lot of institutions using this kind of model. For example, in the European Commission now, in the benchmark, you know perfectly, in the benchmark that we have now for 2014 to 2020, all of the funds, they need to be accept using this kind of model with some simulation ex ante. So after that, I would like to know your opinion about it. Thank you.
Okay, let's have a question over here.
Mi nombre es Valentín Solís.
I'm Valentín Solís.
No estoy totalmente de acuerdo con la última
I don't entirely agree with this last question that was asked. I often am a patient. I go see a doctor because I have a problem in my kidney or in my lungs or God knows what. And I don't have to have knowledge of medicine and understand the inner workings of the body in order to get a prescription. And so I think that what we need to find with models is precisely that, is to have a compromise that allows someone who's not fully competent in the model to be able to use it. That's part of the responsibility of those of us who build models, to make them friendly, to make them easy to use, and in a way to educate, or at least let them know how to be prudent in using them. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to use science to inform policy, just as we wouldn't be able to take a pill or get a shot if we didn't have a good understanding of how it works. So I think that really finding that compromise is hard, but I think it's possible. I think there should be ways to simplify reality, to model reality, and to have responsible users. Are there any other questions or comments? I think we have one over here. My name is Andrés Blancas from the UNAM, from the Institute of Economic Research.
I would like to ask some questions about your exposition. In general terms, I agree with you. All the things that you expose are topics as you said, in a very intuitive way. It's a way in which science or experiments may work, or academics in science, in social science, we can work in. I wonder what are the novelties in Ecomod. You talk about all very quickly, but what are the novelties in Ecomod in terms of the software, the GAMs, and also the way in which you build the general equilibrium models, and so on. That's it.
It looks like there are no more questions, so I would like to add one, if that's okay with you. Following this same train of thought of this last intervention by the UNAM researcher, I would like to ask you, Ali, if in terms of the software or how you tackle problems that could be environmental problems or climate change problems, but very specific topics. Do you have, let's say, what is the state of the art when it comes to these tools in order to tackle specific problems of this type?
So thank you so much for these interesting questions and comments. Let me start with the first comments and questions of my dear colleague, friend, Alejandro, and Professor Solis as well. It is not really about the academics. I mean, what I meant is, it's not really about the academics and the people working in the institutions. What I mostly wanted to say is that about the tools, not really the people. The tools are quite different. This is what I meant. Now, I'm a lucky person in the sense that I've been a professor in 2 different universities, in many different research networks, but also I've been working in and with international institutions and many governments really around the world since a long time. So it is this experience working both in academia and in decision-making bodies that really taught me that we need to be very careful with academic models. And it is really simple, really, to understand, because the purpose, once again, of academic models is really different. You know, we build models, so if I want to write a paper, you know, my purpose is really well defined. I want to write a paper on a subject, and my purpose is to go and present in a couple of conferences and publish the paper in a journal and extend my knowledge or my understanding and other colleagues, you know, transfer to other colleagues what I'm doing. That's the only purpose. I'm not trying to change the reality as an academic. This is really how academics, be careful, I'm not talking about normative positive. I'm taking here the positive stand. I'm not saying this is how we should behave. I'm saying this is how academics behave. And the reason is because, you know, the promotion, nomination, appointment, and so on, they depend on how many papers and where people publish, where they publish, and so on and so on. I mean, the purpose is very different. Now, a government, for example, let's take the Ministry of Finance. Well, who cares if the simulations are published in a journal or not? What the government really needs to know, and in a reliable way, how will different, you know, income groups will be influenced? How will different sectors in industries in the economy will be influenced if I change the tax system? The purpose is very different. It means that as an academic or a PhD student, if I am building a model, even with the tax system, I should not go and advise the government. Unfortunately, now it comes to the people, many academics pretend that they can advise. They should not, because the tools built by most academics are not relevant, are not good enough, are not reliable enough. So we need to learn to be modest as academic economists. So if the tool will be used for decision making, you see, then we need to go and build models which are suitable for decision making. This is what I meant. And that distinction is really important because, you know, in this field, I see tons of academics who try to tell the government what should they need to do based on very simple models or simplistic models. They should not. This is what I mean. They should not. We need to learn as academics to be really humble. Our models are not good representations of the reality. In most cases, I mean, you read and me, I read also tons of papers. They are not good representation of the reality. It is not, it is like, you know, curing a patient using a medical theory which is not validated, not well tested, and so on and so on. You know, we need to be very careful. Second thing, and there I fully agree with you, Alejandro, because we have also experience, of course, not only academia, but also for international institutions and also business. many people in the institutions don't know necessarily enough, you say, about these models. So then it means that I fully agree with you. But academics don't know about policymaking either. You see, we have a problem in both cases. So it means that, and I agree with Professor Solis, it means that we need to find a model, you see, and that is what Ecomod has been trying since 20 years, really. We are trying to change the model. It means that that model is not suitable. So what we're trying to do, in order to improve things, we build the models, you know, when we work with governments, we design together. Then our, you know, economists, programmers, software guys, they take care of all this heavy working. But the design initially is a joint work because the client knows much better than I do. If I go and build a model for Africa or for Saudi Arabia, they know much better than me how in Saudi Arabia labor market operates, and so on, and so on, and so on, for example, just to give you an example. So the design, so it means that in model building, our model, I mean business model, is like a, you know, what's called in medical, let's take back again because it's a good example, medical. It is called personalized medicine. This is the state of the art, and this is also a little bit also an answer to Dr. Lilia. In the old days, I did my study, I was born in Turkey. I did my studies in a special school, English-American school. It was a boarding school, so I stayed in the school, and there was and we had a clinic in the school, you know. And there was a very, very kind lady to take care of, you know, kids who were sick and so on. And, you know, when anybody went to the clinic, this wonderful lady was called, "Oh, my kid, so I don't know, you have a headache? Take this aspirin." And then, you know, another kid comes, "Oh, you know, my stomach hurts." And then she would say, "Oh, my beautiful kid, your stomach hurts? Take this aspirin." You know, everything was an aspirin. And in medicine, it is the same thing. You go to the medicine, there are a number of given, you know, medicines. But what we know now, today, about our bodies, even if we are all humans, we are very different. You see, very different. So this is the future, in the sense that in the future, we will, you see, data is so important. We will use data about everything, about our history, personal history, our genes in detail, our biome, our neurons, and so on. Then, using big data, we will be able to provide much better medicines, you see? So our purpose in the modeling field is the same. It means that never use a model from the shelf. Design the model, like design the medicine, taking into account the patient, genes, taking into account Mexico economic genes, the structure, the details, how things work here. Not to start with the theory, start with the reality. Build the personalized medicine model, whatever, modeling platform, databases for Mexico. So, I mean, that is, so that is then it means that in the institutions, we don't necessarily need all these people. We might take care as modelers, as Ecomod network and colleagues working together, we can build a model, platforms, you see, maintain them, improve them, design them together, but so that we have well-informed users. They don't need to be medical doctors. This is what I mean. They don't need to be doctors in modeling, but they need to be knowledgeable. And if they know that when there's a question, there's a medical doctor they can call, "Oh, should I increase this dose today or decrease it?" Then it is fine. But issues are not important. I mean, we are still in the learning phase, in a sense. I hope I could answer, but there's no really one straightforward answer to this. I mean, just to summarize, tools built for academic purposes are usually, in rare cases, they're okay, but usually they are not relevant for policy making. Number two, as economists, we need to be very humble. We don't know much really about how the economy works. Third, there are so many new software, new modeling techniques that most economists, because we do everything, and I'll come back to your question, most economists don't even know about them, about the software and so on. They just know one, hammer, hammer modeling, because they know one technique that they want to apply it to many things. This is rule number 3. And number 4, of course, design and build models as close to the reality as possible, depending on the purpose of the tool, of course, Coming back to, to Dr. Blanco's question, this is one of the things what we do in Ecomod. We are not specialized in social accounting metrics. We are not specialized in computable general equilibrium model. We are not specialized in macroeconometric model. We are specialized in policy modeling. What it means is that we use any software, any. So we choose the right software for the right modeling plot technique. We use and build any modeling technique. Social accounting modeling, input-output modeling, general equilibrium modeling, overlapping generations model, macroeconometric modeling, dynamic stochastic modeling, many models, agent-based modeling, system dynamics, and so on. We don't put them on our computers. We even teach in Army, in defense. We can use any modeling technique. And this is really the good thing in Ecomod, because we are not a hammer modeler. Because we work with so many different institutions in so many different countries. So we need to build tools to answer different questions, to answer different issues. And 1 or 2 types of techniques cannot do that. And we have so many colleagues having experience, practical experience, not just the theory, practical experience in all these fields. So in terms of software, we use, of course, GAMS, eViews, Stata, Dynar, MATLAB, some very, very specialized software like NetLego, all kind of really software. Software programming languages like Python, C++, C#, and so on and so on. So the idea here, again, is to build tools which are suitable to the policymaker. And we teach them. So we have a school and we have alumni in more than 150 countries in the world. We teach in a practical term, so really in hands-on. People take their computers, they learn how to use these software to build models in different techniques. And we have programs around the world, regular programs and many, many on-site programs around the world. I just came from Nigeria. 2 weeks ago, I was in Nigeria. We brought people from more than 10 countries, 11 countries, if I remember well, from ministries, from government, Western Africa to Nigeria in Lagos, and my colleagues for 2 weeks were there to teach them how to build and especially how to use models. So the state of the art here, so once again, really, we design, and when we design, we use, so for different issues, the state art is of course different. But for climate change, energy, water issues, social accounting matrix database, and dynamic general equilibrium, computable general equilibrium models are great tools, great tools. Sometimes they need to be combined with technical models, bottom-up, for example, energy models. This is why you really need a multidisciplinary team in some cases. Because as economists, we don't know the energy field well. But so we need to learn from them. Thank you.
Dr. Bayar, thank you very much for your contribution. We have a small token of appreciation on behalf of the university. Thank you very much for having accepted the invitation. And could you please give him a hand? And thank you for your attendance.